light, dim the streets in moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, real by real we pull apart.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Real Talk. I'm your host, Josh, and today we've got a treat for you. The Slums of Beverly Hills from 1998, directed by Tamara Jenkins. This film is the perfect blend of humor, heart, and just a bit of gritty realness. It tells the story of Vivian, a teenager trying to figure out life, love, and who she wants to be, all while living in the slums of Beverly Hills. At least that's how her family sees it. It's a coming-of-age film that doesn't just skim the surface of growing up. It digs deep, makes us laugh, cringe, and even reflect on what it means to belong, to be seen, and to grow up in an imperfect world. Now, the Slums of Beverly Hills didn't exactly have the kind of blockbuster reception that some other 90s indies hits had, like Big Lebowski or Clerks, but it's quietly become one of those films that keeps coming back around. And you know the kind I mean, the ones that aren't flashy or in your face, but rather to feel like they're a bit of a hidden gem, something you stumble upon and suddenly find yourself obsessed with. And that's the Slums of Beverly Hills in a nutshell. It's not just about the laughs or the awkwardness of adolescence, though there is plenty of that. It's about the messy, sometimes beautiful, sometimes heartbreaking reality of growing up, especially when the odds really feel stacked against you. And I think it's special about this movie is how it kind of weaves together this humor and heart. You get the laugh out loud moments, and then underneath is all this really tender exploration of family, class, and identity. It's one of those films that really hits you in the feels when you least expect it, and that's not something you see every day in some of these coming-of-age stories. And that's part of the reason why it stands out. And as we've done in this entire series, it's a coming-of-age story, but told through a female lens. And I think that shifts the way we see the familiar teen tropes. Because you've got the awkwardness, the first crushes, and the inevitable rebellion. But with Slums, there's this refreshing honesty about what it's like to grow up as a girl in a world that expects you to fit into just a certain mold. And while Vivian, our lead, doesn't exactly have it all figured out, it's clear that she's on a journey toward finding herself. And that's something that anyone can relate to, no matter who you are or where you come from. The film's charm also comes from the way it plays with the backdrop of 1970s Beverly Hills. I mean, when you think of Beverly Hills, what probably comes to mind are images of luxury, some palm trees, and living the high life. But this film flips the narrative and it gives us a view of a very different Beverly Hills. This one is a little more raw and a little less polished. Vivian and her family are living in a rundown apartment, just trying to make ends meet. They don't exactly fit in with the world of expensive cars and designer clothes that's all around them. It's a clever commentary on class and what it means to try to make a place for yourself when your surroundings don't quite match your aspirations. But really, what makes the film so special is its warmth. Because it's funny and it's got cringeworthy teen moments we all know and love, but more than that, it's about figuring out who you are in the middle of all that chaos and finding a way to come out the other side, not necessarily unscathed, but definitely more whole. They're not a perfect family and it's not a perfect life, but it's a real life, and that makes it resonate. So in this episode, we're going to dive into all of these layers. The unforgettable characters that make the film memorable, the social themes it tackles on its way in ways that you might not expect from a seemingly lighthearted indie flick. And then we'll explore how the film subverts some of those classic coming-of-age tropes and give us a story that feels fresh and genuine, even if it is set against the backdrop of a very specific time and place. But before we jump into all that, we're going to take a quick break and then come back and get into the background of the film, who's behind it, what inspired it, and how it came to be. Because understanding where the slums comes from makes its message even more powerful. So we'll be right back. Okay, so before we really dig into the Slums of Beverly Hills, let's take a little detour and chat about the woman behind the camera, Tamara Jenkins. Now, I'm willing to bet that the name Tamara Jenkins doesn't always ring a bell for most people, but her influence in the world of indie cinema, especially in the late 90s, early 2000s, is definitely worth acknowledging. She's kind of a hidden gem in the world of filmmaking. So this film was her directorial debut, and she came out swinging. It's such a distinct and fresh voice right from the start. This movie feels personal, like someone who really understands what it's like to balance humor and real-life struggles, to mix family dysfunction with moments of unexpected tenderness, and that's something that stays with her throughout her career. After this film, Jenkins went on to make The Savages in 2007, another film about family, but this time with a much darker, more adult tone. And that film was a huge hit, with critics praising it for its honest portrayal of siblings dealing with their estranged father's decline. But both films really dive deep into what it's like to be in a family that's falling apart in one way or another, but still somehow holding it all together, even if by the tiniest of threads. But let's circle back to the Slums of Beverly Hills. So what drew Jenkins to tell this particular story? Well, it turns out that it had a lot to do with her own upbringing. She grew up in a working class Jewish family, and that experience really shaped how she saw the world. This isn't just a fictional tale about a teenager struggling with her family's dysfunction. It's a reflection of Jenkins' own life. The complexities of growing up in a world that doesn't always match up to the image of success or wealth around you. And you really feel that when you watch this movie, you really feel it. It's not just about the economic hardship, though. It's about navigating a world that doesn't always recognize you or your circumstances, but finding a way to still find joy and humor and connection in it. Now, when The Slums of Beverly Hills was made, the late 90s, it was such an interesting time for movies because indie films were really having a moment. Directors like Wes Anderson, Paul Thomas Anderson, the Coen brothers were all pushing boundaries in terms of how stories were told, how characters were developed. It was this whole new wave of filmmaking that felt fresh, exciting, and more than just a little offbeat. At the same time, though, we were also seeing a shift in the kind of stories being told. Female directors were starting to step up and make their mark in ways that they hadn't been able to before. You had people like Kimberly Pierce with the devastating Boys Don't Cry, Nora Ephron with the updated film You've Got Mail, and of course Tamara Jenkins right here. And these women weren't just making films for women, they were telling stories that reflected this broader spectrum of experiences, and they were getting recognized for it, and Jenkins was definitely part of that wave. And I think something that sets The Slums of Beverly Hills apart from some of those other films, though, is the way it portrays growing up as a girl. as we've talked about over and over in this series, most coming of age stories focus on young men. So in this one, the first love, the first big rebellion, the struggles with identity, those are often framed through that masculine lens. But Jenkins is able to flip that, bringing the female perspective that doesn't just center on those usual tropes. Instead, she taps into the complexities of being a young woman. The awkwardness, the curiosity, and the desire to just fit in, and the pressures of trying to figure out who you are in a world that's constantly telling you that you're not enough. And of course, the 1970s setting is another interesting layer here. In the late 90s, there was this nostalgia for the 70s. You had films like Dazed and Confused by Richard Linklater. You had Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights and others that looked back at that era. But in Slums, the 70s aren't just a backdrop for fun cultural references. They're part of the story's soul, the economic struggles of the time and the theme of personal reinvention that was happening both socially and politically really align with what's happening in the story. Vivian, the protagonist, is caught between her family's financial struggles and her dreams of a better life. And the 70s is a time when America was grappling with its own identity and these shifting values. That intersection of personal and societal reinvention really speaks to what was going on culturally in the film's era. And let's not forget the subtle way that this film touches on issues of class and gender and family. The late 90s were a time when the discussion around representation in Hollywood was just beginning to really take hold. Female filmmakers were starting to make waves, and this film was adding to that conversation, whether through Vivian's struggles with the expectations of femininity or her family's struggle to make ends meet in a world obsessed with wealth and status. But Jenkins isn't hitting you over the head with a political message. It's all there in the details. I mean, the way Vivian looks at the mansions and wonders what life could be like if she wasn't stuck in her family's chaos, or the way she tries to emulate a certain version of womanhood that feels unattainable and still deeply relatable. It's not heavy-handed, but it's certainly there. Jenkins navigates these themes with such grace, and it really elevates what could have just been another quirky indie comedy into something with more depth and heart. So with all this in mind, the personal connection, the cultural moment, the rising female voices in cinema, it's no wonder that The Slums of Beverly Hills stands as such a key film in its own right. But with the groundwork laid, let's move on and dig into the heart of the movie itself, the characters and the narrative, because at the end of the day, it's really the people and their journeys that make the film resonate. And trust me, these characters, they're so much more than what they first appear. Alright, so now let's get into the heart of Slums of Beverly Hills, starting with the story. And the plot itself isn't anything revolutionary on the surface, just a coming-of-age tale about a 14-year-old girl named Vivian navigating the ups and downs of adolescence. But when you really dig in, you'll see that it's all in the execution. The film takes place in the 70s in an old rundown apartment in Beverly Hills. And I know what you're probably thinking. Beverly Hills, isn't that supposed to be this glamorous, fancy place with palm trees and fancy cars? Well, yeah, but not for Vivian and her family. Vivian lives with her eccentric father, played by Alan Arkin, and her older brother, who's definitely a bit of a mess. Her dad is this lovable but perpetually struggling guy who's always chasing the next big thing, usually some get-rich-quick scheme. He's charming in his own way, but not exactly what you'd call a real responsible role model. Vivian's older brother, well, he's a bit of a lost cause, more interested in getting into trouble than helping his younger sister out. So Vivian's got a lot on her plate. She's living in a place that's falling apart, her family far from picture perfect, and she's just trying to survive all the awkwardness of being a teenager. And here's the thing, Vivian dreams of something more. She wants more than the chaos and dysfunction of her home. She wants to fit in with the wealthier kids at school, wants the shiny, glossy version of Beverly Hills with all the luxury and perfection that comes with it. But the reality of her situation keeps pulling her back into the messiness of her family life. It's a constant tug-of-war between wanting something better and dealing with the imperfections and challenges she faces. And let's face it, we've all been there, right? Wanting more, dreaming bigger, but realizing the world around you doesn't quite match up to that dream. So what makes Slums stand out here is how it shows the struggle through Vivian's eyes. She's trying to figure out who she is, what she wants, and how she fits into the world. But unlike a lot of the coming-of-age films, it's not about a dramatic moment of realization. It's subtle. Vivian's transformation is a quiet one, and it's all unfolding over time as she begins to embrace the reality of her life. At the start, she's embarrassed by her family's poverty and is desperate to be a part of the more glamorous world around her. She cringes when she sees her father trying to sell used furniture to people who clearly don't want it. But by the end of the film, she finds a sense of peace, or at least an understanding with her situation. It's not so much about rejecting her family, but learning to accept it. And that's the heart of this film, really, the acceptance. It's about Vivian finding her worth not by escaping her circumstances, but by coming to terms with them and realizing that maybe, just maybe, her life doesn't need to be perfect to be valuable. It's a quiet victory, but it's a powerful one. Now let's talk about the character of Vivian. She's played here by Natasha Lyonne, and this performance is just, well, it's everything. You might know Lyonne from her work in Orange is the New Black or American Pie, but here, in her breakout role, she brings this real energy to Vivian. She's funny, smart, full of personality, but also incredibly vulnerable. You can feel every bit of her discomfort as she navigates the trials and tribulations of being a young woman in the 70s, trying to make sense of the world around her. And that vulnerability, I think, is what makes Vivian such a relatable character. You know exactly where she's coming from, and you root for her all the way. And then Alan Arkin's portrayal of her father, a character that could have easily been a cartoonish, neglectful dad, but Arkin here gives it so much depth. He's a flawed, often clueless man, but there's something really endearing about him. He really believes that he's doing the right thing for his kids, even if his methods are questionable. The dynamics between Vivian and her dad is one of the most interesting things in the film. It's not a traditional father-daughter relationship, but it is filled with moments of real connection. Moments where you can see they genuinely care for each other. It's awkward, but it's real. There's this one scene where her dad tries to give her advice about life, and it's such a classic dad moment. It's awkward, misguided, but it really comes from this place of love. And that's something that this film does so well. It takes these moments of discomfort, these awkward family exchanges, and makes them feel relatable. because let's face it, most of us have had those awkward family moments. And you can see that Vivian is frustrated with her dad's antics. But at the same time, she's learning to deal with him and her family because it's all part of growing up. But I think what I really love about the film is how it portrays the coming of age experience in a uniquely female perspective. Because it's not about figuring out who you are. It's about grappling with societal expectations and gender roles in a specific time. Vivian's journey isn't just about discovering herself. It's about figuring out what it means to be a young woman in the world. She's starting to experience her own sexuality and growing awareness of how she's perceived by others. And the film doesn't shy away from these struggles, but it doesn't exactly overplay them either. The film doesn't get bogged down in some heavy-handed feminist message. It just shows Vivian, a teenage girl, figuring things out in the messiest, most honest way possible. And the best part, it's really funny. It never gets preachy or overly dramatic. Even as Vivian is dealing with all these complex emotions and situation, there's a lightness to it all. The film uses humor to tackle tough topics, like when Vivian has her first kiss, or when she's trying to figure out how to be herself in a world that doesn't make it easier for her to do so. It's funny and it's awkward and super relatable in that way. So when we think about the relationships in this film, it's not just Vivian and her father or Vivian and her brother, but the whole idea of family. Because it's not about being perfect. It's about finding ways to connect, even when things are falling apart around you. And that's something this film captures so beautifully. Now, we're about to dive into some themes, but let's pause and take a look at the larger implications of what the film is saying about identity and self-acceptance. It's not just about growing up, it's about accepting the world around you, your flaws and all. So let's dig into those themes and symbolism next, because I think the film has a lot to say about that flaws and all aspect of the world and you. All right, well, let's dive into some of the big themes that the Slums of Beverly Hills tackles. Because this film doesn't just tell the story of a teenager trying to figure out her place, it also uses its setting, its other characters, and its moments of humor to explore some deeper ideas that honestly I think we can all relate to. A key theme that jumps out first is the concept of class. You can't watch this movie without noticing how it plays with the idea of Beverly Hills, this symbol of wealth, glamour, and privilege, and contrasts it with the harsh reality that Vivian and her family are living in. Now, the title itself is pretty genius. The Slums of Beverly Hills. It's this cheeky contradiction. It's like an oxymoron, because Beverly Hills is the place known for its mansions, its celebrities, and the whole idea of the American dream. But Vivian and her family aren't living that dream. They're just barely scraping by, and they live in an apartment that's falling apart, barely able to keep things together. I love, though, that this film is never getting bogged down in criticizing the wealth of Beverly Hills or the people that live there. It doesn't try to make Beverly Hills into some kind of villain. Instead, it does something more subtle and thoughtful. It just lets you feel the contrast. This is where Vivian lives. It's right next to the glitz and glamour, but it's not her world. And the filmmakers don't need to say anything outright to get this point across. It's clear from the way that the characters all interact with the environment. For Vivian, there's the constant tension between what she wants, what she's dreaming of, and the reality of her life. It's not just about financial insecurity, it's about fitting into a world that's not really made for her. And I think that's where the external pressure comes in. At school, in her neighborhood, even with her own family, there's this constant reminder that they're different. And then there's the internal pressure. Vivian is smart, capable, full of potential, but she's also painfully aware of the fact that she doesn't have the right clothes, the right friends, or the right home to make her feel like she belongs. You see her trying to navigate all this, to juggle these competing forces of wanting to be a part of something more glamorous and wanting to hold on to who she is. And the movie really nails that feeling of wanting to be seen. Like you're out there trying to figure out who you are, but you're also keenly aware of how the world sees you. And Vivian, she's caught right in the middle of it, trying to make sense of both her circumstances and her own desires. And it's beautiful that this film doesn't make Vivian's struggle only about class. It's not a sob story. It's messy, complicated, and layered, but it's a deeply human and relatable story. And that brings me to another big theme, the family dynamics. Now, I know this might sound like a pretty obvious theme for a coming-of-age story, but here in the Slums of Beverly Hills, it's handled in a unique way. Because at first, the family may seem like just another example of quirky, dysfunctional group. You've got the dad who perpetually is chasing pipe dreams, the brother who's clearly struggling to figure out his own life, and then there's Vivian, stuck somewhere in between it all, trying to hold it all together. But beneath all that chaos, you get this really sweet, sometimes painful portrayal of love. There's tension, there's frustration, and there's a lot of emotional baggage. But there's also a lot of affection, and in many ways, that's what keeps this family going. The relationship between Vivian and her father is fascinating. It's complicated. Her dad is a character who's lovable in his own weird way, but he's also deeply flawed. And Vivian has this combination of love and anger for him. It's like one moment she wants to crawl into his arms for comfort, and then the next she's rolling her eyes, wishing he'd just get his act together. It's real and messy, but so true to life. And the thing is, it's not just about that tension. It's also about what that tension means for Vivian's growth. Because even though her dad's a bit of a wreck, it's clear that he loves her, and that love is what keeps her grounded. In a lot of ways, it's like the film is saying that family doesn't have to be perfect to be important. We see Vivian struggling with wanting that normal family, the family that fits the mold of what she sees in the others' lives. But as she comes to understand herself more, she starts to realize that her family, though imperfect, is the one that's going to shape her into what she's meant to be. Again, messy, awkward, and flawed, but it's theirs. And that brings us to a huge part of Vivian's arc, and that's her own self-discovery. And that leads me right into the symbolism of this film. Now, if you've watched the film, you know that one of the most striking visual motifs is the scene where Vivian tries on her mother's clothes. This happens really early in the film, and at first it's almost playful. A girl just dreaming about her life and what it could look like if she was someone else. Vivian's mother is this kind of mythic figure in her life, someone who's left a mark but isn't really there to guide her. So Vivian decides to step into her shoes, literally. It's a powerful moment. It's almost like she's testing out what it would be like to be someone more glamorous, someone who fits the mold of what Beverly Hills tells you you're supposed to be. It's like a costume, something that lets her pretend for a moment to be the person she thinks she should be. And you get it, right? We've all had moments like that, where we try on a role that we think we're supposed to play, whether it's based on the pressure from society or maybe just our own insecurities. We sometimes feel like we need to put on someone else's persona in order to fit in. But I think something that's so brilliant about the way the film uses that moment is how it doesn't just let Vivian stay in that costume. As the movie goes on, she starts to shed those expectations. Whether it's by realizing that the glamour she imagined doesn't bring her any happiness, or by coming to terms with the fact that her family and her roots are part of what makes her who she is. And by the end of the film, she's not looking for a costume to wear anymore. She's learning to wear her own skin, flaws and all. So the clothes, the glamour, and the yearning for a different life is all tied into the process of Vivian learning to accept herself as she is. And I think that's one of the more profound things this film does. It shows us that we don't have to become someone else in order to feel valuable or loved. It's about being comfortable in your own skin. And as Vivian moves towards this realization, we see how her family, despite all its dysfunction, provides the foundation that she needs to grow. Not perfect, but hers. And that makes all the difference. So with all that in mind, Vivian's journey, the class contrast, the complex family dynamics, let's move on and talk about the reception of the film and how it's been remembered over the years. How did audiences and critics first react? And what kind of impact did it have on the coming-of-age genre and indie cinema as a whole? So stay tuned for that. All right, so let's talk about the reception and impact of the Slums of Beverly Hills, a film that, when it came out, wasn't exactly a box office sensation, but has earned a special place in the hearts of indie film lovers and fans of coming-of-age stories. Back in 1998, it was sort of a quiet hit. Critics responded positively to it, especially for its quirky, offbeat humor and how it managed to present an authentic, heartfelt portrayal of growing up in a somewhat unconventional setting. While it didn't go on to be a massive financial success, The Slums of Beverly Hills became one of those films that people could point to as an example of indie cinema done right. One of the standout features of the film was Natasha Lyonne's performance as Vivian. For those of us who followed her career, it is clear that Slums of Beverly Hills was where she first showed the world how much range she had as an actress. It's easy to forget now, but at the time, Lyonne was relatively unknown. But in this role, she brought a perfect blend of humor, vulnerability, and nuance to a character that could have easily been reduced to a simple, stereotypical teen. Critics praised her for being this young talent that felt like someone you might actually know in real life. Funny, awkward, a bit rebellious, but genuinely just trying to figure herself out. And can't mention him enough, but Arkin, who's just phenomenal as Vivian's dad. His performance is like a balancing act between totally clueless and well-meaning and completely endearing in his own chaotic sort of way. But it's Lyonne who really carries this film. The way she portrays Vivian's mixture of cynicism and hope, there are those layers of her that just really make her very relatable. And the fact that she was so young at the time and yet had so much control over the character, I think it made audiences take notice of her in a really big way. The kind of performance that makes you think, yeah, this actress has a future. Now, in terms of the Slums of Beverly Hills' broader cultural impact, it didn't necessarily go on to be a game changer for indie cinema like Pulp Fiction or the Blair Witch Project did, but it did quietly carve out this space, especially the late 90s, where female filmmakers could start to get more recognition. This was right around the time when women in Hollywood were pushing against that glass ceiling. And films like this helped set the stage for more female-driven narratives to just break right through there. And it wasn't just about the fact that a woman was directing it, but about the way it approached a female protagonist in a way that was honest and complex and relatable. It wasn't focused on making her a perfect character. Vivian's messy and complicated. She's flawed, but she's also smart and capable, and that kind of portrayal is something that's become increasingly important in film today. It's also worth noting that this film fits into the larger context of the 90s cinema. The 90s were truly a golden era for indie filmmaking. The likes of Quentin Tarantino, Richard Linklater, and Kevin Smith were really dominating the scene, and the Slums of Beverly Hills represented something a little different. It didn't have the violent edge of Tarantino or the slacker charm of Linklater movie or the pop culture references and language of Kevin Smith. It was quieter, more character driven, and more introspective. In a way, it kind of predicted the shift that would happen in the early 2000s toward films that focused more on the internal lives of the characters, especially young women. But perhaps most importantly, the film is still a shining example of the kind of low-budget, character-driven filmmaking that thrives in the indie world. This is a film that doesn't need a huge budget or flashy special effects to tell its story. It's a movie about people, relationships, and growth. There's an honesty in the way it presents its characters, especially the way it portrays Vivian's family life. Because the film doesn't shy away from the struggles of growing up in a broken family, but it also highlights the love and connection that still exists, despite everything. And that's something that resonates universally. And as time has passed, the film has found a second life in the form of a cult following. It's the kind of film that initially people found on VHS and then DVD and now on streaming platforms, and feels like it speaks to them in a way that you don't expect. It's got that nostalgic indie film, the charm that makes it perfect for late night viewing with a bowl of popcorn. And I think it's really earned its place as one of those underappreciated gems from the late 90s that over time, more and more people have come to recognize as meaningful and well-crafted. In the years since its release, it's also become a bit of a talking point for those interested in the history of women in film. It helped pave the way for more female directors to gain attention for their work, but not because that they're women, but because they had something important to say. The conversations around female filmmakers in Hollywood has evolved since then, but films like this were part of the groundwork for the kind of representation we're starting to see more of today. So while it may not have been a massive hit, the lasting impact is undeniable. This is a film that stands the test of time because it's not just about the 90s or the 70s or Beverly Hills or adolescence. It's about finding your place in the world, even when the world around you is a little messy. And as much as it's a story about growing up, it's also a story about finding beauty in the imperfect, which is something that is still really relevant today. So now that we touched on its impact, let's dig deeper into how the film handles everything, looking at the film's significance. We'll explore that next. So why does the Slums of Beverly Hills really matter? Well, this is a film about finding your place in the world, a coming-of-age story like many others, but it's the way it handles the messiness of life. Specifically, the awkwardness, confusion, and chaotic beauty of growing up. That makes it stand out. This is a film that offers a tender, honest portrayal of what it's like to navigate those teenage years, all while trying to figure out who you are, where you fit in, and what it even means to be an adult. And I think it's amazing that this film it doesn't shy away from the harder stuff. It doesn't sugarcoat things. Vivian's journey isn't perfect. Her family is struggling financially. Her father's dreams are way bigger than his ability to make them happen. And she's just trying to survive the emotional roller coaster of being a teenager. She's a lot like us, trying to make sense of the mess of her life while also dealing with the fact that, life doesn't always go according to plan. And honestly, I think that's what makes this film so relatable. It's just very human. And let's talk about self-acceptance for a second, because it's a huge theme in this movie. In the beginning, Vivian is embarrassed by her life. She wants to be seen as more than just the daughter of a father who's kind of a mess. She doesn't want to be the girl from the slums of Beverly Hills. She wants to fit in, to be someone else, someone more polished, someone with it all together. And who can blame her? We've all been there, especially in those teenage years. You start to realize that maybe you're not what society says is ideal, and you feel that pressure to conform. Vivian has that pressure times 10 because her family isn't the glamorous Beverly Hills ideal. It's rough around the edges, to say the least. But here's the thing, as the film moves forward, we watch her slowly shift from trying to escape her circumstances to realizing that her circumstances are part of who she is, and that makes the film so powerful. It's not just about escaping poverty or the dysfunction of your family, it's about growing through it. You don't have to be someone else, you don't have to fit into some glossy version of what life is supposed to be like. Your imperfections, your struggles, the messiness of your life, they're all part of your story. And Vivian's journey towards self-acceptance is something that a lot of people can connect with, regardless of age. And it's also something that's really timely. In an age where social media makes us all feel like we should have perfect lives, this film reminds us that it's okay to be imperfect. It's okay to feel like you're not quite there yet, and maybe that's one of the reasons that it still resonates. It's timeless because it speaks to the universal struggle. Figuring out who you are in the world that's constantly telling you who you should be. And what I think makes Vivian's journey stand out so much is how it's influenced by the women around her, or in her case, the lack of women. We get a sense of the missing maternal influence in her life, as her mother is never really present in the story. Vivian is surrounded by male influences, her father, her brother, and the men she meets along the way. But there's a distinct absence of a strong female figure. This absence isn't just a plot device, it's a reflection of Vivian's struggle with her own identity as a young woman. The film shows her searching for answers in places that might not be the healthiest, like in the way she dresses or her attempts to fit in with older men. But ultimately, it's through those trials that she starts to understand what she really wants out of life. And speaking of identity, let's talk about the importance of family in this film. It's funny because the Slums of Beverly Hills is kind of like a love letter to the mess that is family life. At first, Vivian's deeply embarrassed by her father because he's always chasing that scheme or idea. He's never able to get a foothold. But despite his failures, he's there for her in his own way. And over time, Vivian starts to see the value in her family. The dysfunction isn't something to escape from, it's something to navigate. It's her family that shapes her into the person she's becoming, and in that she kind of finds strength, and it's a strength that comes from accepting who they are, accepting who she is, and realizing that love doesn't have to be perfect. And now this whole idea of family is layered in such a beautiful, subtle way. We watch Vivian interact with her dad, her brother, and even the guy next door. Each relationship is fraught with tension at times, but they also give her something. They give her a sense of who she is, what she values, and what she won't tolerate. They help her discover her voice, and that's the thing. Family isn't just about love and support. It's about conflict, resolution, and growth. It's about pushing each other, sometimes in uncomfortable ways, but still finding a way to hold on to each other. But it's also about the kind of love that isn't perfect. And this is what makes it such a great movie. It's not an idealized version of growing up. It's messy, and it's about real people struggling in real ways and finding love and acceptance, not despite their imperfections, but because of them. Vivian's journey of self-discovery is something that transcends her story. It's something that many of us can relate to at different points in our lives. Whether you're a teenager or an adult, the question of who you are and how you fit into the world is one that never quite goes away. But the film's message is clear. It's not about escaping who you are or where you come from. It's about learning to live with it, grow from it, and ultimately embrace it. And here's the kicker. It's not just about self-acceptance. It's also about understanding that sometimes, in order to find yourself, you have to look at where you come from. For Vivian, that means looking at her brother and her father and the chaos they bring to her life. For us in the audience, is a reminder that we all have our own mess to deal with, and that doesn't mean we can't find beauty in it. So, what does this film teach us? It teaches us to be kind to ourselves. It teaches us that it's okay to be flawed and that it's okay not to have it all figured out. It reminds us that family isn't perfect, but it's the relationships we have with the people closest to us that help us understand who we are. And ultimately, it's a film about finding your own voice in a world that often tells you who you should be. All right, so to wrap things up, for me, I give Slums of Beverly Hills a solid 7.5 out of 10. Now you might be thinking, wait, after everything you just said, why not a perfect 10? And honestly, that's because while this film is super warm and funny, there are moments where I feel like it's just scratching the surface of something deeper. But also that kind of makes it special because it's not trying to be something that it isn't. It's not any forced drama. There's no over-the-top preachiness. It's just an honest, relatable story about a girl figuring out who she is, all while dealing with some pretty unconventional family dynamics. The charm of the film comes down to the performances, and of course, Natasha Lyonne's portrayal of Vivian. She's got the perfect mix of vulnerability and sass, and you can't help but root for her. She's trying to figure out what it means to grow up and to be okay with not having all the answers. It's the kind of raw, real character work that makes the film stand out. And I think we all know that coming-of-age films work best when the protagonist feels like someone you could be friends with, or at least someone you wish you could have been. And Vivian is kind of exactly that. The film makes you think about family, how messy it can be, how imperfect, but also how incredibly powerful. At the end of the day, it's a film about learning to embrace your flaws, both personally and within the people you love. It's about the ups and downs, the moments that make you cringe and the ones that make you smile, and somehow finding the strength to say, yeah, this is who I am. This is my life. So why isn't it a 10 after all that? Still, I wish there was just a little bit more, a little more depth in some things, and wasn't a real big fan of the brother. He didn't really stand out for me, and I kind of wanted more on the absence of mom. Just some little things, but a 7.5 out of 10 is still a wonderful movie. So if you haven't seen it, please check it out. And if it's been a while, maybe it's time to give it another viewing. And before I go, I have to mention the next film that we're diving into here is a totally different vibe. We're switching gears just a little bit, and we're heading into the neon-colored world of Valley Girl from 1983. It'll be the last film in our series, but it's kind of the one that started all of this. And if you haven't seen this one, get ready for the quintessential 80s teen comedy that is both a total time capsule and, in some ways, a love letter to that over-the-top era. It's packed with big hair, big hearts, and extremely iconic soundtrack. The direction by Martha Coolidge gives the film such a unique, fun feel that you can't help but love it, even if you're not exactly from California or the 80s. There's something relatable about the awkwardness of the young love and the push-pull of wanting to fit in while also wanting to stand out. So next episode, that's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward into that deep dive. But as always, like I said, if you haven't seen The Slums of Beverly Hills, I highly recommend checking it out. It's one of those films that feels effortlessly charming, and I don't think you'll regret it. And if you have seen it, I want to hear your thoughts. What did you think of Vivian's journey? Was there a moment that really hit a home run for you? Or maybe you've got some other coming-of-age films you want to hear me review. Drop me a message and we'll make it happen. Come find me. I'm on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at Real Talk. Occasionally over on X at Real Talk Pod. Email therealrealtalk@gmail.com. Or leave a comment right here where you found this episode. And if you like the darker side of cinema, come check out our horror edition at Real Talk Horror. But for me, that's going to be it for today, folks. And as always, until next time, keep watching, keep loving, and keep those reels rolling. We'll talk to you soon.
Underneath the sun's green, 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 talking reels and all their schemes. Dusty scenes and dreams unfold, stories told in shadows bold. Gritty plots and whispers tight, dim the streets and moonlight bright. We dissect the cinematic art, reel by reel we pull apart. The real talk where voices play with velvet words and starlit sway, reviewing tales both light and dark, classic films that leave a mark. Dive deep into celluloid night, Classic films that leave a mark.